If you're like me, you absolutely love reading, but despite that, it is still very hard for you to start a new novel. Between the characters, the backstory, if you're reading fantasy, the world build, the magic system, the political system, getting started and getting through the exposition of a new book can be mentally exhausting. You know you're going to be so excited once you've gotten into the story, and especially once you've finished the story and you've taken in that world, but beginning it feels like climbing a mountain. But we're readers and we keep coming back to our books because we know that they're going to be worth it and worth slugging through that exposition. So these are my 3 tips that personally have helped me read more books than ever in the year of 2024. And I want to preface this for the rest of the video that the tips that I'm giving you are not like read as many books as you possibly can. It's more of a, if you're trying to get into a book and you're really struggling, these tips help me. I read a lot, so they have helped me read more books, but this is not like an advertisement for overconsumption or anything. It's like just helpful tools. So my first tip is set a timer. In a go-go-go society, like most of us are used to, it's really hard to stop and take the time to read. And it's especially hard if you're already dreading those first few like exposition chapters that you have to have in order to get into the meat of the story. The easiest way to slow down is to essentially force yourself to take the time. The way I do that is I set a 10-minute timer when I'm ready to start a new book. Whether I'm reading the physical text of the book, whether I'm listening to an audiobook, for that 10 minutes, I am not allowed to do anything that will pull my focus away from the story itself. Now, if I'm listening to an audiobook, that doesn't count as folding laundry. Like, I'll fold laundry and I'll listen to the audiobook for that 10 minutes because that laundry is like a mindless chore. And it doesn't have to be 10. Maybe 5 is ideal for you. Maybe even 10 minutes is too much. Or maybe 20 is what you think you need in order to like really start moving forward and progressing, and you have 20 minutes to give. So I now have a routine as a reader where when I'm starting a novel that I'm struggling to get into or I just keep putting off, I'll set that timer for 10 minutes. For that 10 minutes, I focus only on that novel. And I usually have to do that about 3 rounds. It doesn't have to be 3 consecutive rounds, but I make myself do that for 3 rounds at some point to get myself into the novel. And then usually after that bit of time, I'm in it. Now I will say this, I'm a really fast reader, so 30 minutes to me probably gets me about 50 pages in. Like, I read really quick. And then when I listen to audio, I've noticed that I have to listen like at the lowest speed of 1.5. So 30 minutes for me really ends up being like at least 40, which typically, again, gets you through that exposition phase. So in 2024, thanks to the timer trick, these are 4 books that I have read. My second trick is to listen to audiobooks. And for some people, this is going to be intuitive and you're like, duh, Taylor, what are you even talking about? I didn't listen to audiobooks for a very long time because I was convinced that it wasn't going to be the same experience as like sitting down and reading a novel. I wouldn't process that novel the same way. And so it would take away from that joy that I had of reading, and it would lend to overconsumption. It would lend to me just trying to get through books as fast as possible. That's not the case. Audiobooks have allowed me to read more books than ever in 2024 because I can do other physical tasks or activities while I'm listening to the books. It doesn't detract from my focus on the story because those tasks that I do while listening to audiobooks are pretty mindless. I'll putter around and I'll clean the house, or I'll work on something like digitally creative, not storytelling creative. I will sit down after a long day of work and just play games on my phone and listen to my audiobook, and it's the most relaxing thing. Dare I say I look forward to chores now? No, that's absolutely ridiculous. I hate cleaning. But I do like listening to my audiobook while also being productive. Even more than this, I have gained access to genres that I normally would have never read or have tried to read and couldn't read thanks to audiobooks. Namely, I'm talking about nonfiction. I have never been able to get into nonfiction, but with audiobooks, if the nonfiction is written in short essays, or if it's a memoir or a narrative style nonfiction, I've been able to read those because they sound like podcasts. I mean, I listen to them like they're a podcast, but really you're reading a book. And then on the education side of this, with dyslexia rising to, gosh, is ADHD still the number one? Dyslexia might have beaten out ADHD, but I'm not sure, so don't quote me on that. Regardless, access to audiobooks has helped students with dyslexia in the elementary level or in the secondary level have the same opportunities as their classmates, which is pretty incredible. So if you're interested in the study that's gone into the reading experience of a physical book versus an audiobook, I'm going to go ahead and link the super scholarly article and then also the easy for Taylor to read version in the description, or I'm going to put a little plug in for my website because I have written a blog about this. If you go to my website, which is also in the description, I usually am able to write my reviews and my blogs and everything like that way faster than I can record them. So that's the fastest way of keeping up to date with content you might be interested in. These are 4 books that I have read in 2024 thanks to audiobooks. And my last trick is mood reading. Mood reading is exactly what it sounds like. It's reading what you're in the mood for. I used to pick up a book, start reading it, not be able to get into it, but then tell myself that I have to finish this book before I move on to any other book because it felt like cheating on that book, or it felt like failing to not finish that book that I had picked up, especially if it was a good book that I knew that I was going to enjoy and I just couldn't figure out why it wasn't hitting in that moment. It felt, I don't know, validating to have somebody say, no, it's okay to put that book aside and come back to it later when you're mentally ready for it or you're in the mood for it. Or if you want to put that book down in DNF, then that's totally fine too. I have also DNF'd more books this year than I ever had, and I feel like my enjoyment as a reader has improved exponentially. So my recent example of putting down a book due to mood reading is with Goddess of the River by Vaishnavi Patel. I knew it was going to be an exquisite, beautiful, haunting tale within the first hour of having listened to this. And within the first hour of having listened to this novel, even knowing that, I did not want to listen to it anymore. It had really heavy themes. I had a lot of heavy happening in my life. And so I had to tell myself, you were not in the mood for this. Therefore, you need to go mood read something else because you're not going to enjoy the experience of reading this. This is not the time for this book. So I put that book aside to come back to it later, not as a DNF, and picked up a YA urban fantasy called Darker by 4 by June C.L. Tan, and I flew through that book in 2 days. It was so good, and I worked on a puzzle while I listened to the audio of it. By giving myself the grace to set a novel aside and say, not now, not for me in this moment, I have been able to pick up other books and absolutely fly through them. It's kind of liberating. And it also, keeps me from doing a disservice to that other novel that I set down, because chances are it would have been a great book and I wouldn't have enjoyed it because I forced myself to read it. So these are 4 books that I mood read. And that's the thing, reading should be fun. We pick up books and we enjoy these stories because they mean something to us. So it shouldn't become a chore. Sometimes it's just really difficult to get started and to kind of hurdle hop through the exposition and kind of get a grasp on that dread of learning the new characters, learning the new backstory, learning the new world and the magic system and all of the things. So these 3 tips have become my triple threat for absolutely tearing through novels. And they're kind of intuitive. But at the same time, I didn't do these 3 things for so long. I am well into my adult life actually implementing these things into my reading as a lifelong reader. So hopefully you're already doing these things and they have helped you. But if you haven't already been doing these things, try them out because they might, and I hope that they will, improve your reading experience the way that they improved my reading experience. If you have other tips that you utilize in order to get started on a book or to, again, hurdle hop over the dreaded parts of starting a book, go ahead and drop down your hacks below. That way we can all learn from one another.